Hey guys, welcome to Bible Today. So before we start Bible Today, I want you to be thinking about what you do when you are preparing for a trip. What kind of things do you pack? How do you get ready? What kind of clothes do you wear? What do you do when preparing for a trip? So if you're with someone right now, maybe a brother or your sister or your mom or your dad, go ahead and talk to them about what you do when you get ready for a trip. If you're alone, you can tell your dog or your cat or your animal or your stuffed animal, or you can just talk to yourself. But talk about what do you do when you get ready for a trip. Go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so I know when I get ready for a trip, there's lots of things I have to consider, I have to think about. Most importantly is I want to make sure that I am wearing shoes so I'm ready to go. I want to make sure I have all of my bags packed and ready to go. If it's one of those things where I have to take an airplane early in the morning, I might want to just grab something quick for breakfast that I can eat on my way out or eat later. And so there's lots of things we got to do while we're getting ready for a trip. So during today's Bible lesson, I wanted you to think about those things because the Israelites are going to have to get ready for a big trip. All right, so as a reminder, Moses and all the Israelites are slaves in Egypt. And they've been slaves in Egypt for about 430 years. That's longer than the United States has been a country. And God has sent Moses and his brother Aaron to perform some miracles to rescue his people from slavery in Egypt. So far, there have been 9 really bad plagues to try to convince Pharaoh to let God's people go. Sometimes Pharaoh says he will, but every time he changes his mind and he's hardening his heart against God. And so after the 9th plague, which if you remember was when all of that was the plague of darkness. So it was dark. Moses came to talk to Pharaoh, and this is what happens in Exodus 11. Now the Lord had said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here, and when he does, he will drive you out completely. Tell the people that men and women alike are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed, that means they made them likely to do it, towards the people, and Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and by the people. So Moses said, This is what the Lord says. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the slave girl who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites not a dog will bark at any man or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me, and say, Go, you and all the people who follow you. After that I will leave. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my wonders will be multiplied in Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let any Israelites go out of his country. So, after all these 9 awful plagues, Pharaoh is still not letting the Israelites go out of Egypt. And so God tells Moses something interesting. He says, Tell all the people to go to their neighbor's house and ask for silver and gold. Now don't try this, but if you were to go to your neighbor's house, knock on the door and say, Hello, can I please have silver and gold? They would tell you no. But in this situation, God made the Egyptians so they were afraid of the Israelites and they just wanted them gone. So when the Israelites knocked on their doors, the Egyptians said, Please, I'll give you anything. Just get out of here. Just get out of here. And they gave them silver and gold. Now, these were the people who have kept Israelites in slavery, who have made them work without pay. And now they're finally getting something for what they've been doing. Now, I said think of some stuff that you would take on a trip. Maybe some of you said you would need to have some money for the trip. So buy some food, maybe buy some souvenirs. Well, now the Israelites have some money, their silver and gold, for their trip. They are about to take a trip out of Egypt. Then God gives in the rest of chapter 12, God gives Moses some interesting instructions. We're going to talk about why he gave these instructions a little more in Wednesday's lesson, but right now be paying attention to the instructions he gives. Some of you probably already know why. The first thing he says is I want everyone to take a lamb, a perfect little white lamb, and you're going to have the lamb live with you in your house for a little while. But then, after a amount of time, you're going to kill the lamb. So they're going to kill the lamb, and you're going to do something interesting with the blood. You're going to take some hyssop branches, and you're going to take the branches with the blood on them, and you're going to use these branches to paint the blood on your door. Right here, and right here. So God is saying, take a lamb, kill it, put its blood on these branches, and put the blood right here, and right here on your door. Sounds a little crazy, but okay. Now, if you were paying attention when I just read before in the Bible, you would notice that another plague is coming. And maybe you remember this from when you saw the movie with Miss Vignelle. But God said he is going to kill the firstborn of all the Egyptians. Now, for every plague up to this point, God has saved the Israelites. There were gnats where the Egyptians lived, but not where the Israelites were, and so on and so forth. And God just did this automatically. But this time, God said to be saved from this plague, you have to have the blood on your door. And he said at midnight, in the middle of the night, all of the firstborn is going to die. But if I see the blood on your door, then I'm going to pass over. Pay attention to that word. Pass over your house, and you're going to be safe. He also gave some interesting instructions. He says you got to be ready at that point to leave at any second. You have to have shoes on your feet. You have to have your belt on. Back then they would wear their belts when they would go out. You have to be ready to go. You have to eat the whole thing quickly. Don't leave any food in your house. Be ready to go. So that's what the Israelites did. They followed all of Moses' instructions. They came up to the Egyptians and they said, I'm sure they were nervous, can you give me silver and gold? And the Egyptians said, yes, get out, get out, get out. They took the blood and they painted it on their door. They ate the lamb. And then at midnight, it was very sad. But the last plague, the plague that God told Pharaoh, if you don't obey, if you don't let my people go, this is what will happen. And the firstborn of the Egyptians was killed. Pharaoh had a firstborn that was killed, as did so many Egyptians. And so Pharaoh said, go, get out of here. Just go. I don't want to see you again. Now at that moment, the Israelites had to get out fast. They didn't have time to finish eating. They didn't have time to finish cooking. But thankfully, they had obeyed. Their shoes were on their feet. Their belts were ready. They were all packed and they were ready to go. Now back then, they didn't have any cars. And the Israelites weren't really rich, so they didn't have any fancy horses or anything. And so they left on foot. Now, if you remember when Joseph first went to Egypt, when all of his brothers and their wives and their children and his dad, when they all came down to Egypt, there was 66 of them in all. Well, now it's been 430 years, and the Bible says that there are now 600,000 men on foot. And besides that, there was also lots of women and children. So this is a big group of Israelites all leaving. It says because they were moving quickly, they didn't have time to make bread the right way. You see, if you've made bread, you'll know that you put in it something called yeast. And yeast are these really small round things that when you put them into the bread, they make them big and fluffy. Well, when the Israelites were running away, they didn't have time to put the yeast in their bread. So they made something called unleavened bread. And I have with me here some unleavened bread. This is called matzah. This is what it looks like. It's basically a big cracker. It's bread without any yeast. So this is how they had to cook their bread. And so there's a large group of them ready to leave Egypt.